Hammaga salom do'stlar, meni ismim Uzbekcha Letsplay kanalidasizlar. Bugun Last of Us tugatdi o'zi. Men nima o'tmoqchi edim? Короче, bu yerda syujet bor. Buni o'tib o'rganmiz. Без возврата degan ochildi bizda. Men hech narsani tushuna olmayapman. Испытание nima u? После 50 FPS модификатор. Завершить 2 боя, играя за Элли. Новая попытка. Мам, наверное, ничего не умеем. Давай низкий. Торсы. Элли. Новое стандартное прохождение. Выбранный путь, уровень сложный, низкий. Персонаж Элли. Старт. Окей. Типа nima bo'ladi? Ну, короче, agar qizuv bo'lsa, men kanalga qo'yaman. Qizuv bo'lmasa, kanalda chiqmaydi. Просто сразу oldinga ana qilib qo'ydim. Убежище стенд планирования.
Так, моя очередь.
Твоя какая очередь, Элли? Джексон? Нифига себе. Бля, mana shu narsani anaqa qilmadim-ku. Как бы апгрейд qilmadim. Компиляция шейдеров. В смысле? Отразите все атаки? Tushunmadim, qanaqa atak? Menga как бы anaqalar yopishadimi? Kimdir yuguryapti.
Твою мать.
Твою мать. Voy, блин, bu anaqa-ku. Ham debillarni qara. Yaxki o чудик. Нифига себе. Так, следующая атака. Мама, ты меня не друг ko'rsatyapti. Нифига себе. Men типа har xil lokatsiyalarda anaqa qilamanmi? Блин, прикольно. To'xta, bu turmudirli bo'lsa-chi. Mamo, вообще kerak narsa bo'pti. Akayli bo'la qol. Вообще sekin o'ldirasiz. Вот mana mana shunaqa tez o'ldirsam bo'lar ekan-ku.
Ох ты ж.
O'xshash. Блять, 10 sekund qoldi. Kapец, menga jopami deyman. Пока bu to'ldirish xato. Ana uni yugursin. Бой завершен. Возвращение. А, убежище қатты. Ман, убежище қатты. Tushundim. Ну, такой себе. S. Новым персонажем, обликом, противником, модификатором и другим материалом. Ну. Награды забудь. А. О. Инструкция глушитель. Ну давай, выкидывай в итоге. Tip oxir vosga boramanmi? Buni menimcha streamda qayerdadir o'tish kerak. Понятно. Oho. Ну, короче, tushundim. Mamatda boss bo'ladi, blotlar, u bilan urushaman. Joni вообще ko'p bo'lsa kerakdir. Чисто уже, ну, примерно tushundim. Короче, хархали испытания лейка. Выход в главное меню. Ну, примерно чунарли. Попытка ли. Часть первая. Без возврата, да, ну? Активные испытания можно увидеть в главном меню режима без возврата. Mana bez возврата ekanman. Kubanda. Понятно, без возврата. Короче, походу... Здесь испытание. Окей, tushundim. Ну, unda без возврата tushunarli. Просто anaqa o'tdi. Давай. Вечеринка в Джексоне? Вот типа утраченный эпизод прохождения ранних версий эпизодов, исключенных из игры одни из нас. Часть вторая. Процесс. Разработка qilinayotgan paytda mana shu epizodlar olib tashlangan ekan. Эти эпизоды представлены в незаконченном виде. Ну, то есть oxirigacha ishlanmagan ekan. Снабжены отключаемыми комментариями разработчиков. За кулисами. Просмотр видео реальность. Часть вторая. Давай учим. Так, machot tushunmadim. Nimalarni biz anaqa qila olmagan ekanmiz? Ну, bu qiziq, bu syujet bilan bog'liq bo'lganligi uchun bu qiziq. Tak anu испытанияларni bilmadim, agar sizlarga qiziq bo'lsa, обязательно kommentariy qoldirsanglar, men o'taman. Endi u chista shooter-da, bekinib, o'ldirib, mana shunaqa. Agar интересный bo'lsa, gap yo'q, bitta stream qilib bosib olsa bo'ladi. Menga chista такой, anaqasi qiziq bo'lgan.
You're about to play an unfinished level from The Last of Us Part 2.
Lost levels, Jackson Party?
The reason we added this section is there are a few sequences, and we picked the 3 of the best ones, that we cut from the game. You know, often we build a game that's much bigger than what ends up being the final product. They were months away from being finished, but we wanted to give you an insight of what it's like when we built the game, because often we have this whole thing constructed and it doesn't have final art or audio or dialogue. And here you get to see the building blocks of what it's like when we first string a bunch of these levels together. This is the intro to the first deleted level, and this one is the roughest of the 3. We wanted to show more of how Jackson operates. So this is the festival where Ellie ultimately kisses Dina. This sequence would have come very late in the game as a flashback sequence while you're in the farm with Dina. And we wanted to show what is the rest of Jackson doing, and wanted to put on the stick, make it interactive. So you could see when you're outside, there are all these almost like carnival games that you can play.
Jackson was a qanaqa yashagan Jackson deg odamlar.
Kids that are playing a sort of clicker Marco Polo, sit down and listen to conversations. And all the different interactions were first or second pass, very, very early passes. The building blocks are there, but nothing is final. And ultimately, while we were very excited
nothing
by
is
the sequence,
final.
It's pretty fun and lighthearted. It just slowed things too much as we're barreling towards the end of the story at this point. So again, reminder, rough, missing audio, missing animation, missing gameplay tweaks, missing dialogue, but pretty representative of what it would have been. So enjoy.
Прикольно. Или долгий был. Валя. Короче, o'yin o'torini optimizировать bo'lganlikchi. Okey. Ну, короче, bu endi scenalar не optimizированы-ku. Men tushunmadim. Alkashka. А? Короче, не закончены сцены,
Originally, this level was going to transition us to farm. We would go all the way through to the dance, where Ellie and Dina share their first kiss. Then we would play through farm, and when Ellie plays the guitar at night, she would remember the Seth incident.
Короче, разработчик
The
gapiryapti.
opening for this was a
Wayne and
little
Idris.
tricky. We needed something we really wanted to do was highlight the way their lives had turned upside down since she went down this path. We had this idea of recontextualizing
Короче, mani
all of
listening'im
our
tushib
usual
ketgan,
gameplay
tak что,
mechanics that were designed for really violent ends. The workbench, door bashes, throwable weapons, and even the infected, which is my
Короче, Neil Druckmann nima
Pepper
demoqchi bo'lgan?
throughout
Endi
the
men,
level
скорее
are
всего, tushundim. U
moments of
Neil
levity
Druckmann, главный
or shared
продюсер.
history, all the while seeing how happy and mundane they all were before her huge revenge odyssey.
Okey. U tipa ko'rsatib bermoqchi edi endi, ну, endi kam ko'rsatishdi Jackson haqidagi hayotni. Endi bolalar bilan to'g'ri ozgincha qora tushib o'ynashdi, yana nimadirlar kirdi. Bu полностью как бы ko'rsatib bermoqchi edi Jacksonning hayotidagi narsani.
It is not a festival without one of these throwing games. This one, of course, uses our throwable system where you're often chucking explosive things or stunning things, but for a more wholesome purpose, although some people take this game really seriously. A fun aspect of this is if you did well, you could win a toy here. Ellie would place it in her pocket. If you had done this, you'd find the toy with JJ, the baby, later back at the farm. When we cut this, the toy made it through anyway because it was so cute. It is the same one you see on the tractor at the farm. Ollie the elephant.
Bilmadim, men tushunishim bo'yicha mana mashdan biz qanaqadir ana igrushkani yutib oluvdi, esinglardami? Biz JJ o'sha kichkina chaqaloqi ana traktor ustida topib olardi, o'sha menimcha mashdan yutib olgan. В смысле? Нифига себе. Бермейсің башқа.
It is not a festival without one of these throwing games. This one, of course, uses our throwable system where you're often chucking explosive things or stunning things, but for a more wholesome purpose, although some people take this game really seriously. A fun aspect of this is if you did well, you could win a toy here. Ellie would place it in her pocket. If you had done this, you'd find the toy with JJ, the baby, later back at the farm. When we cut this, the toy made it through anyway because it was so cute. It is the same one you see on the tractor at the farm. Ollie the elephant.
Che slonёnок, to'pa-to'g'ri. Balli menga shans beruvdi. Men agarda buni yaxshi aniq qilganimda menga o'sha igrushkani berardi-da, o'sha igrushkani ko'radi. Blyaj, boshqatdan ber menga o'tishga buni. Mayli. lsa-da. Bu короче, hayotni ko'rsatib bermoqchi, Jacksonda bo'lgan hayot. Ha, zvuklarni ham olib tashyapti. Просто anaqa kommentariy. Nima chizyapti? Hammasi o'qib o'tdi.
The makeup artist is pretty simple. It's one of those little in-game scenes we peppered in to make it feel like Ellie had roots in the town. Hallie, our writer, mentioned that in her mind, an ex-girlfriend of Ellie's tattooed her arm to cover up her scar. So we figured this might be the only time you get to see that. We wanted to hint at it and allude to it and make it feel like there had been... We use our workbench a lot to make a lot of things that kill and maim and hurt people. Here, we had the silly idea of using the same feel, harkening back to the same animations, using the exact same UI to instead fix a drink. Like the workbench, you could pick your base and then you could add something to it. And at the time, we had some different reactions from Ellie based on how strong you chose to make the drink. Something we wanted to prototype though, before it got cut, was picking up some ingredients around to add, like a lime, or a bottle of someone's favorite whiskey or salt, like you were earning upgrades. We also toyed with having Ellie carry around the drink you made and occasionally sip it, psyching herself up to go talk to Dina inside because she's nervous. It got too noodly though, because she would need to keep placing it somewhere before she did anything. So it would have ended up more trouble than it was worth.
Bu tipa anu o'sha o'pishadi-yu, o'pishdan oldingi holat tipa aytib bermoqchi-da, tipa boshida festival bo'lgan. Endi bilmadim, men tushunishim bo'yicha tag'in bilmadim. iOS bilan davno shug'ullanmagan.
This is one of my favorite sections because I
Играть
think
щелкуна.
that it achieves both the slice of life aspect of Jackson while also being a stark reminder of how dark the world that they live in really is. To attract attention and curiosity, one of the kids was supposed to make this adorable, messed up little clicker impression, and the others would giggle. We tried a version where if you got close enough, the kid might try and follow you a little before turning back. Since clickers are blind and move by echolocation, for this game of messed up tag, Ellie must close her eyes and listen for when the children give themselves away. The thought was that these kids are in relative safety. They still grow up with the dangers of clickers and runners, and all those lessons would embed themselves in the games that they play. When the festival got cut, they tried to preserve this moment and move it to the front of the game where the snowball fight is, as a tutorial. However, being in the headspace of a clicker doesn't really teach you how to deal with them. Eventually, it evolved, and they instead made the snowball fight, which was, I think, way more effective. For me, it's character illuminating that not only does Ellie know this game, she plays along. There's a familiarity with the kids that's really nice to see, especially because it's such a difference from the Ellie we see later, who has a sort of hollow normalcy that she's trying to get with JJ, but kind of fails.
Ozgincha o'tirdi ketdi. Ну, интересно. Вот оно.
There's a hidden spot at the back that was just a bit of fun. It was highlighting Jackson's normalcy with something we would find in a real world. In the back, you would find teenagers finding some alone time with each other in a dark corner of a party.
Zapal. Zapal.
We also had versions of them smoking weed here, despite Maria's consternation, probably having gotten it from Eugene.
Вот чисто зона запала. Да. Sekin qochib ketdi. Ishinglarni bitirdinglar-da. Bu Maria. Kстати, Tommiga nima bo'ldi? Men tushunolmadim. Trima Tommi. 3-части bo'lish kerak, обязательно 3-части bo'lish kerak. Usiz bo'lmaydi. Men qayerga ketdim? Вечеринка в Джексоне. Канализация светла. Давай, kanalizatsiya. Ну, в принципе, Jacksonni hammasini ham ko'rsatib bera olmadi. Просто shu вечеринка, shu o'qishdan oldin nima bo'lganini ko'rsatib berdi, чисто. Ну, такой себе. Otorma, iltimos. Главное, otorma. Lost level, Seattle.
In this second deleted level,
Daniel
which
Druckmann
is an extended sequence of the sewers in Seattle. This comes on the heels of where Ellie goes into a building and she survives an attack by stalkers and gets thrown out of a window and gets swept away by the current.
No da, bo section
that used to be there in the final game. Now you will get to play it. So this was a way to get a bit more interesting puzzles, interesting traversal, figure out how Ellie can navigate the sewers with the fighting current. Ultimately, with a lot of these levels and these sequences, the reason why we cut them were for pacing purposes. But here it is for you in this very kind of raw form that part of it will feel finished, parts of it will feel like assets are missing as far as audio, animation won't be final. But it's a glimpse into what a game looks like when it's months away from finishing. Enjoy.
Типа bizani o'sha anaqa stalker. Stalkerlardan qochib ketardi-yu. Ma'mullar suvga tushib ketardi. Блядь, FFF. Da, suvga tushib ketardi. Qanaqadir joy ko'rinib qolar ekan. O'sha yerda ular oxirigacha ham ishlamaganligidan o'yinda ko'rsatib qo'ygan ekan. Вот, FFF. И типа biza o'sha yoqqa olib, menimcha borsa kerak edi. Bля, ele tepaga. Olayim, mabotlarga islomiyapmi? O, bля!
Так.
Чё так? Сетотумуни.
Сраный сету. Так,
This level,
Где это я?
internally known as Fine Nora, was quite long in duration as we had to make Ellie traverse a far distance to the opposite side of downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what we released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more. This was one of the few areas of the game that used water flow as part of the traversal process. The player has to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the other side. We mostly cut this mechanic game-wide, however it remained in essence in the section swimming to the aquarium as Ellie when you were avoiding the waves.
Чего говоришь, бля?
The ladder acts as an immediate goal for the player, but being able to climb out is not going to be so easy. To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences. Here, it's a positive to have found a ladder, but then a negative to discover it's not the solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they expect, but not how they expect it.
Man, skорее всего, bilaman nima qilish. Da, chizib qo'yishibdi. Da. Bilam saru bilan chizib qo'yishdi. Bu standart bu.
When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end. The real reason for this dead-end room is that on the reversal, when exiting back out of the doorway, players are faced with the route onwards. A pipe that they'd not been able to see when they were swept past it on the way in, and something that was hidden from view when on the side platforms. The intention here being that the only option is to go off the standard path in order to search for a way out.
Elli aloqa.
заберите меня отсюда.
Блять, elli aloqa. Nima?
Throughout the rest of the level, we also use light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. At each turn, however, we block the direct route forward. Players would know that they just have to keep finding alternative paths, promoting those feelings of being... We slowly introduce the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight spaces. This is to slowly build up to and encourage the player to climb into such a small pipe that they'd have to be crawling on their stomach. We added a tiny
Короче,
space just
Джеко
to reward the player's
Вахтовсон,
exploration.
разработчик,
With the
бля.
pickup, we love the idea of making Ellie prone through a tiny dirty pipe in order to get out, as it was a great opportunity to use our prone mechanic. The unique camera
Главное,
setup was
держать себя
created
в
to
руках.
support crawling
Или
in these
я прот,
pipes, as
разработчик,
the
я прот.
standard prone camera is much higher above the
Он
player.
моя.
We also created custom collision in order for Ellie to maneuver in these tight spaces easily. Initially, the oblong collision capsule around her character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort into the custom corner collision, so the move, in order for the player to feel cramped, claustrophobic and desperate, we'd been enforcing the traversal mechanics that allow for a tight environment which promote these feelings. We introduced the use of the squeeze through so that we can keep the player feeling enclosed and tight, but without repeating the same geometry. Here we change from low ceilings with wider walls to high ceilings and tight walls to change up the spatial pacing and keep the level from repeating itself.
Men xaragis kelmayapti. Просто olib qochyapti kameraman. Bля.
Вот где я точно не...
Kamerani yomon ishlabsiz, bolalar.
Originally, we had the water line much higher here, so players had to swim through this tight tunnel. As we surface from the water and over the crest of the slope, we reveal what is further in this tunnel. A clicker that has sprouted and the fungus has grown on the sides of the pipe. It was great to see people who user tested this area becoming increasingly worried as we forced the player to squeeze past the fungus and inches away from the clicker's face, all the time not being sure whether the clicker might be alive or attack them. Although we aren't as cruel as to force a
Блядь,
clicker attack in such close proximity, we do have a payoff for this moment.
Elli,
The
блядь.
clicker momentarily turned into Joel to show Ellie's PTSD from what happened to Joel at the start of the game. Ultimately, we decided to save this moment for the farm level, as it was more impactful there because it could become the centerpiece of that experience.
Нифига себе.
Whereas in the sewers, we weren't able to make it as much of a narrative point and give it the breathing room and reaction time that it deserves, given the tight space.
Вот черт!
Блядь, сырпанып кеттім.
For the final section, we eventually opened you out into a wider area as you traverse through such tight spaces leading up to this. So changing the environmental pacing makes it begin to feel like we're coming to the end of Ellie's ordeal. An earlier iteration used the current leverage shown at the start for a slightly tougher traversal puzzle to conclude the sewers. The ladder was clearly visible from most of the area, but the player was faced with a fast-flowing torrent of water they couldn't cross. If the player attempted to jump into the water, they were not able to swim across the ladder due to the water's speed, but instead they had to traverse the pipe running along the top of the space in order to get across the water.
Ну, понятный нарсида.
This is the first time we get to see stalkers that are embedded into the room. So this optional room is a nice little early extra that the player gets if they explore. We also use the pickups to lure players over to be close enough to trigger the stalker's attack. This caused quite a few jump scares with user testers who played our game before its release.
Отлично.
Отлично. А как мне туда перебраться? А вот там оттуда другого. Так, что чунарсыз? Ну давай, мамерка. Очень нас yok. А вот я что yok. Так, man что чумём, а? А ты как бы ты намудрился. А. Ой, бля, манекен, ку. Капец.
Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge. The last ladder climb is quite lengthy, and although we could have trimmed it down to a shorter climb, we liked how this last segment of the journey built anticipation for whether there was success at the top or not after all you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects to the final game. Ellie then has to find her way to the hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
Sal tushunmadimi bu joyi, lekin mayli. Охота. Вот, ну короче, agarda anu выживаниyalarni endi o'sha har xil o'sha bossgacha borish agar Ko'rish xohlasanglar,
For this third and final deleted level, what we call the boar hunt sequence, this was a sequence pretty late in the game. It was right after the whole Seattle Abby sequence where Abby spares Ellie. And then we wanted to come back into Ellie's story, but keep it a bit mysterious of how much time has passed, where is Ellie now? So we're coming in on Ellie and she's following a trail of blood. And we wanted to mirror in a way the deer hunt sequence from the first game, but this time do it with a boar.
No.
And there's something with Ellie that now she can't let go of this violence. She's pursuing it even against this innocent animal. This was another opportunity to show how the violence that Ellie has experienced, the violence that she witnessed being afflicted onto Joel, is still sticking with her, and she's still experiencing these PTSD moments. This was a sequence that was pretty far along and was cut pretty late in production. Parts of it are still really rough, but the gameplay, the building blocks were all there. I think you'll have fun to see, like, again, a rough, unfinished sequence that you can play. You can see all the way to the end, and including a cinematic that we end up cutting. And the remnants of the sequence ended up being mentioned in Ellie's journal. So this part of the story that we developed still made its way to the game as kind of optional stuff that you could read about, but here you get to experience it. So as a reminder, this is pretty rough, months away from being finished, but you get to see it now.
Okay, ano اللي مع شبعت.
Где ты?
So the boar hunt was one of the hardest levels for me to work on. It was a huge challenge with the systems that we had, and we kept trying, but it never felt quite right. Originally, the level happened after the Jackson Festival, which also got cut, but before Farm. Once the festival got cut, it became the prologue to Farm. The intended experience is that we jump forward in time after the fight with Abby in the theater. We don't know where Dina is. We likely assume she's dead because she was just bleeding out. Ellie is alone. Her hair is short. So maybe this is the future or the present. And she's hunting. Hunting who? Abby still?
Ну, не совсем. Блять, вот его мазик.
Вон он.
Кто он? Ага.
In early iterations of the fight, it was more arena-like. The player slowly whittles down the boar's health. Ellie gets more visceral and more vicious. We get a little worried about her. As the boar gets weaker, more panicked, more feral, and we start feeling sympathetic to the boar was the hope. In all of these iterations, especially of these wider areas, it required custom AI and scripting to make sure it continued to feel organic as an animal, but we really needed it to do specific stuff. It needed to be able to close distances really, really quickly. It needed to charge to attack, but we wanted the feeling of hunting, so we needed to track it down from afar. And we also needed to discourage the player from attacking the boar when it's that close, or the gas station was built to highlight the boar's destructiveness. Since it's cramped, the boar feels larger. We also feel trapped with it, though perhaps it's trapped with us. When it charges, it gets to us quickly, so we must be on our toes. This made it more aligned with Ellie's sort of hunting for trouble mindset. Listening became more important, as well as moving around slowly so it didn't hear you. Could you spot it before it saw or heard you? And could you get a shot off quickly enough so you could dodge out of the way? Or is the shot worth the cost after? It feels like a gamble. By the end of the fight, everything would likely be in shambles. The boar would burst through the back, and Ellie would follow it and finally enact revenge.
Ну чё? Опа! Ой, блядь, o'xshamas ekan. Блядь, anu ranchomni nimadir qilmoqchi bo'ldim. Свинья, блядь. Блядь, отвали. Ну, чарчилькан bu. Мразь! Uy, yuvib qoldimi? Yaxki. Sinata.
The boar kill was supposed to be anything but glorious, with the boar whimpering at the back.
Давай, o'ldiroqqa. Типа o'zingni Kafes. Прикольно. Ну все. Галла чунда. Ну, за кулисами. Подкасты. Due to the COVID content, the footage had been left unedited until now. Area 5. Ну bu qanaqa snimat qilishgan, to'g'rimi, filmni? Блин, ну o'yinga как-то joylashtirish kerak. Bo'ling, разработчиклар joyi. Блин, har doim qiziq bo'lganman mana shunaqa o'yinlarni sozdавать qilish uchun. Endi to'g'ri, C++larni o'rganish kerak, Unreal Engine da hammasi yoziladi.
For what is about to be a very long presentation.
Endi bunaqa o'yinlarda shunaqa katta komanda bo'ladi, lekin
Anthony and I ran some numbers, and to our best guess, The Last of Us Part 2 is 10 to 30% longer than Last of Us Part 1.
No da.
However, this is the most detailed story presentation we've ever done. Like, if you think about the presentation for T1, where we kind of talk about the quarantine zone in somewhat detail, even though most of it changed, and then it's like, and here are some things that might happen with Joel and Ellie. They might go into a spore-filled subway tunnel. They might fight some cannibals. At some point, Joel will get incapacitated. This has everything figured out, even though it might change. Every character is accounted for. Every cinematic is accounted for in this presentation.
No, manimcha skучный bo'lsa kerakdir bu narsalar. Ну bu просто anaqa. Презентация. Видео презентации игры одни из значит с PlayStation Experience, которые были первые показаны новые облики. Длительность 2 минуты. 2 часа сотрудники студии Naughty Dog расскажут вам о том, как создавалась культовая игра «Одни из нас. Часть 2» и позволят заглянуть за кулисы ее разработки. Ну, это уже чисто kimdir listening практиковать qilaman desa, eshitib ko'rsa bo'ladi. No, bilmadim, bizga jamroq qiyin qiziq bo'lmasa kerakdir. Сотрудники студии Naughty Dog расскажут вам о том, как создавалась культовая игра и позволят заглянуть за кулисы ее разработки. Длительность 2 минут. Презентация. Мама, подкаст уже. Ого, только на английском языке. Ну, давай, мама, 2 минуты eshitaylik-chi. Filming began to document the development of The Last of Us.
This is the longest, most ambitious game in the studio's history.
Ага, mana прям.
That's a big challenge to take on.
Fuck, dedi, chindilarmi?
The Last of Us was this beloved game that won all these awards.
So many people were like, Last of Us 1 is perfect. They shouldn't make a sequel.
My hope is it's going to make the first game even greater.
That's the thing I love about the beginning of a project. It's like, it's all optimism. This is going to be the game that I always dreamed about making.
Level designer.
Let's do something new. Let's take risks.
Let's kill Joel right away. Let's just kill him.
Yeah, I was like, what? Yeah, let's do it.
You're going to piss a lot of people off.
Translator.
The scope on this game is extraordinary.
I'm confident in the game if we finish it. I'll be frank, it's not looking great.
I'm feeling burned out. I
Yani
can't
ham
punch
ish
like I used
ham
to.
ish qiladiganlar mana mashilada.
We started having these
Stop tushunishinglar uchun
It was awful.
bunaqa
There were a
o'yinlarni
lot of
sazat
days where I would
qilish
just
uchun
cry.
вообще katta komanda kerak. Bilmayman nechta odam
then
100 tami,
there's
400
these
tami.
rumblings of this pandemic.
Har bitta
Are people going to
zvuk,
want to play a game that takes place in a
har
pandemic when there's a
bitta
real
shu
pandemic?
zvuk, har bitta mелочь hammasini o'zini professionali bo'ladi. Masalan, даже yurayotganingizdan oyog'ini ovoz eshitadi, g'irchiq qiladi, yo nimadir kesil zvukdan tortib
Keep the faith.
hamma narsasigacha ham har bittasini
When
o'zini
we come
ответственный
together,
odam
when we
bor.
do this thing that people outside the studio talk about, like this Naughty Dog magic, this is what it looks like.
Masalan, даже oddiy tosh bor-ku, tolani ko'rasizlar, o'shani даже ekspertini olib kelishadi-da, o'yinda to'g'ri chizilganmi, noto'g'ri chizilganmi, qanaqa bu realniy ko'rinishi kerak. Mana shunaqalargacha spetsialist olib kelishadi. Ya'ni o'tlar qanaqa to'g'ri выглядеть qilish kerak, поведениялар qanaqa bo'lishi kerak. O'shangacha spetsialistlarni olib keladi-da bu o'yinga, maksimal realistik bo'lish uchun. No, qolganini menimcha tushundinglar, уже да, в принципе, hamma narsani tushunib bo'tdi. Nima syujet, основной syujet o'tdi, безвозвратно bo'tdi, чисто anaqa. Har xil попыткаlar, испытаниялар, чисто men bossgacha yetib olish kerak. Agar shu boss qiziq bo'lsa, endi menimcha qanaqadir streamda o'tsa kerakdir. Вот. А так все. Все. Разное, bu boshqa narsa. Bu o'tdi уже типа ochildi o'tgan. Yoqqan bo'lsa, обязательно like bosinglar, kommentariy qoldiringlar, kanalga obuna bo'linglar. Keyingisida biz Resident Evil seriyalarida ko'rishamiz. Обязательно ko'ringlar. Resident Evil ham konkretno o'zimga cel qo'ydim. Shu Resident Evil HD dan, ya'ni eng birinchi Resident 96-yildan bugungi Residentga chiqqangacha полностью o'tib chiqmoqchiman, syujetini tushunmoqchiman. Shu Resident Evil HD ni o'tib bo'ldim, Zero ni o'tib bo'ldim. Endi 2 ga xudo xolisa bosamiz. Ikkinchisini o'tamiz, undan keyin 3, 4, Revelation, 5, 6, короче, мощный bo'ladi. Обязательно obuna bo'linglar. Va keyingi seriyalarda ko'rishgungacha ham do'stlar, hammaga rahmat. Xayr.